Welcome to the Morrison Report. Hosted by Deval Morrison, sales representative for Bosley Real Estate Limited Brokerage. Ms. Morrison has co-authored the best-selling book, Success Today, with Brian Tracy, and has been interviewed on NBC, ABC, and CBS affiliates by Bob Guinea from The Bachelor. Deval, a real estate investor, has spoken to many attendees at her real estate seminars and is currently ranked in the top 5% of agents in her brokerage. Join me in welcoming your host, Deval Morrison.
On today's episode, we have Michael Siskind, a principal of Decade Group Incorporated, a real estate development firm focused on self-storage, industrial, and commercial development within the Ontario market, and a principal and founder of Decade Homes, a leading residential developer with projects in Toronto and Kitchener-Waterloo. Welcome, Michael. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Deval.
Awesome. You know, consumers are always complaining about how long it takes to get their condo built. So I thought it would be a great idea to speak to someone like Michael, a condo developer, to talk to us about what are some of the challenges that you face on meeting those timelines.
Well, I think it's about setting expectations, and probably condo buyers may not understand all of the steps that it takes to take from the time from which they buy a condo to the time in which it's ready for them to move in. What they probably don't understand is the amount of things that are out of the control of the developer or of the builder. So what I mean by that is condos are typically sold pre-construction. So the plans have been developed, the site plan is approved by the city, but the plans to build the actual building are not finalized. Once the developer has enough sales, they'll finish the building plans, they'll get them approved with the city. And that can be the first time in which you have a delay.
Right.
The city may take a bunch of time to go back and forth with you and with the plans and so on, meeting the building code, finalizing the urban design of what they want to see on the streetscape and so on. That's stage one. And then stage two is when you actually go into construction, and builders will always depend on the trades. So the trades are, the builder may say, I want to build this and the building should be designed and built this way.
Right.
But the trades, the electrician, the plumber, the drywaller, it's all those firms that we have to depend on to meet a certain schedule.
Okay. And what's it like to work with some of those trades then?
Well, it can be a great process. It can be a challenging process. I would say that when a project starts, everyone has the right intention that they want to build it on time, on budget, and they hope that the plans are complete. When you get into construction, especially residential construction, it's a very, very complex build form. And when you look at the way that the code is done, both from a fire code and building perspective, there's a lot of intricacies that go on. Inspectors that are coming in, so the city's watching you, and in Ontario, Tarion is watching you, protecting the home buyer. And it's complex. And so what happens is every time there's a question, it might have to go back to a consultant, it might have to go back to a trade, it might have to go back to the developer. And you have layers of questions and answers that must happen in a certain sequence. All of those have potential to add a delay as you go.
Got it. So when you're dealing with some of the inspectors, do they let you know up front what their expectations are, so at least when they come on site, things go smoothly?
Great question. The building inspectors typically, I would say that the personality can probably drive a bit of how they react to your development.
Okay.
And how they treat you, but you can have an effect on that by treating them with respect and giving them the proper information. Some of the breakdown occurs to some degree in that a building department, meaning the city, is approving your plans. But that being said, that's in a two-dimensional scape. And when the building is built in 3 dimensions, the building inspector will walk through and look at what they interpreted. Basically, are those plans matching what is the build form? And if the inspector doesn't agree that they do or has a different interpretation, the building inspector actually has the final say. So they can say to you, I don't like that. I understand it was designed that way, but I'd like you to do it that way.
So when those kinds of things arise, what that happens with that building inspector, let's say they don't like a way a certain thing is done. Now, when you go back to your trade that did that work, does your plumber or does your architect necessarily agree with what that building inspector said, or is there a discrepancy sometimes?
So the consultant is the first person you would talk to say, is the building inspector coming from the right point of view? And if they are, and as I said, some of this can be gray, and so it's their interpretation and we must follow it. The trade, we will go to them and say, did you build it as per the spec? They'll say, yes, here it is on the drawing. Or if they didn't, they'll rebuild it for us at their cost. That being said, if the inspector has given us something that is not in accordance with the plans, it'll become an extra to the developer. So the trade will say, no problem, we'll get that done for you, and then they'll charge you an extra to do so.
Got it. Wow, that sounds like a lot of fun and a lot of negotiations. Now, how do strikes affect your business?
Well, again, the builder is really only as good as the trades that show up on the site, and so I like to think of us as a conductor in all of this, and the players of the instruments are our trades. So we are just actually ending in Ontario a strike that happened over the last 6 weeks, which involved, I think, 6 or 7 different trades. What happens there is you encounter what's called an unavoidable delay with respect to carry-on, and it really just, not only does it delay you, and sorry, if I can pause and just go back to the sequencing.
Yep.
And we'll take by way of example a drywaller. So let's say the drywaller's on strike. If the drywall's on strike, you could imagine there's many things that can't happen. You can't put your kitchen in. You can't put your flooring in. You obviously can't paint. So things can really be at a halt. And then when the strike ends, everyone who was wanting that trade for the last 6 weeks, they want them to come on. Sites like mine that are going, they want them to come back. There's not enough labor basically to fill the demand. And so a strike that for instance, here lasted 6 weeks might cause a project 12 to 15 to 18 months delay.
Wow.
Sorry, weeks, not months.
Geez, that's crazy. And then I guess obviously there's a ripple effect, because if they can't come and do the work, that means everybody else has sort of stopped working for that same period as well too, right?
Absolutely. And not only that, I mean, we as developers for our purchasers feel terrible because they had dates that they wanted to meet. They've given notices on apartments or they've sold their homes and they're expecting us to meet that date. When you have an unavoidable delay like this, there's really nothing we can do. And as I explained to one of our purchasers the other day, we feel the pain probably a little bit financially more than they do, because during all of that delay, which you can imagine that can extend our schedule, let's say by 3 months,
right,
we have to pay interest on the land, interest on all the construction, and all the operating costs of our contractors and trades, because they're still, your site is still running, so there's still a lot of costs that happen that are not recoverable from my perspective.
Right, of course. Now, does weather play into anything in terms of delays in your business?
Well, it does. So from a builder's point of view, 100% it does. You know, you can have a mild winter, which allows you to more easily do some of your work. 2 years ago, we had, our coldest February that we had ever had, which, we had days, I think, 15 days under minus 20.
Right.
By the union regulations, and most trades just won't show up in that kind of absolute freezing cold.
Right.
In the same way, believe it or not, when it gets too hot, trades will also not work on your site. So if it hits, 30 degrees and then you have the humidex on top of that, the trades will leave your site.
Wow. So global warming is not good for your business.
No, we like mild, tepid weather that just continues. And of course, the other one is rain delays. So you have to budget for that. But that's why when you predict at the start of a building when your date's going to be, you have to understand that there's flexibility that needs to happen because of some of the issues we're talking about.
Got it. Anything else that you regularly see that sort of ends up causing delays from your perspective?
I think it's the coordination of timing.
Yeah.
And the people need to understand, for instance, your roofer, when you say, I would like you there on March 15th, and then in February, you had a bunch of delay because of snow. You had something that had to go back to your consultants, and all of a sudden you don't need them until April 1st.
Right.
When you call them and say, I want you on April 1st, they say, well, that's great, except that I started a job on March 16th because you didn't want me anymore. Now I can't come until April 15th.
That's totally frustrating.
It's very frustrating. And imagine on a site at any one time, you probably have 30 trades, of which 15 of which are major trades.
Wow. So now walk me through the process once the building is built. And for people who don't understand, there's an interim occupancy phase there. So once the building is built, consumers get to move into their condo. There's an interim occupancy fee until it actually finally closes and transfer ownership over. So Michael, can you just walk us through the process of closing the actual condo and why sometimes there is a delay during that interim occupancy phase?
Sure. The easiest way to think of interim occupancy is really just a replacement of rent. So as a condo completes, let's say develop, you were buying a condo from me and I say, okay, September 1st, you will have occupancy of the condo. We meet that date and on September 1st, you move in. I'm not allowed to close that condo until I have what's called registration. And the registration is a document that's provided by the city. It's a legal process whereby we are registering the finalized surveyed plans of the condo. And there's a bunch of things involved in that. We are aligned with the purchaser in that when they're paying us interim occupancy, it's really just, instead of them having to pay their mortgage and paying their operating costs, the developer is paying those costs for them. And then by this interim occupancy fee or this rent, it reimburses us. When we close, which is the registration of the condo, and that can be anywhere, on a very fast timeline, 3 months, on a long timeline, maybe 9 months. That's the point at which purchasers are able to close. They're putting in their final payment. They're starting their mortgage, and the developer is getting paid. So again, I don't think purchasers understand that until the condo is registered, the developer is not taking their money out. So the developer is still paying their mortgage, and the developer still has all of their money invested. So it's good that both the purchaser and developer are on the same side.
Right, of course. So now, is there a certain percentage of occupant, during that interim occupancy phase, do you have to wait for a certain percentage of people to be occupying the units before that you can apply to close the condo building?
Well, it's the first question. I think you've stumped me. I think the answer is that there is a certain one. In our case, luckily, by the time we've got to registration, we've been over 95% sold in our development. So it hasn't been an issue.
Okay,
the other
perfect.
thing that I would like to add is that from the developer side, we actually don't have control over the timing of the registration. So we start the process many, many months before we are completed the project.
Yeah.
But it sits in the city legal department, which is really the delay that happens. So we wait alongside our purchasers, waiting for the ability for the closing to happen.
Got it. That makes sense. Is there anything you think consumers should know when they are going to purchase pre-construction condos?
Well, I think in lieu of the discussion today, I think it is good for them to understand that in pre-construction, you have to be prepared for timelines to extend. So typically people would think, okay, I'm going to move in 2 years out, and they look at that date and sort of schedule their life around it. As we've talked about, there can be many things that influence that. And I think keeping in touch with the developer to understand what those timelines are will help them make their planning easier.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I would say the other thing is planning for a couple things when they're buying their condo. The condo purchase is one of the financial, considerations. The second is that there's also an upgrade process that some purchasers may not think about, which is a condo or even a home is typically going to have a base building package. From that, the purchaser will be offered upgrades into their home. I'm a big believer in doing certainly a minimal amount of upgrades.
Okay, how come?
Because it's a chance for you to really design your home in the way that you want. And from personal experience, I know that when you renovate, the best time to do your renovation is the time you're doing it. Don't say, I'm going to wait and I'll do that later. I'm going to do that later, because it's a mess in your home. It's a hassle. It's stressful. It's best to get it done. And also, the builder, when they're doing the upgrades within the process, will be the best chance for the purchaser on a cost basis to get things done. Because, for instance, replacing your granite later will cost you a lot of money versus upgrading to the granite you want at the start.
Right.
Putting if I were to suggest a few, you always want to put in an undermount sink. You always want to upgrade your faucet. You may want to upgrade some pot lights. You want to put in all your cable connections for where you're going to place your TVs. Things like that. It's worth thinking it through. Got it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That makes sense. And what do you think about all the condo development going on in the city right now?
Well, as a condo developer, I think I'm encouraged that we still have a faith in our economy here. I think that people are being a little bit more careful of what they're doing. It's important to understand that what we're seeing right now was planned many years ago. So when you see the cranes in the sky, those are developments that started 4 to 6 years ago in the planning phase, where the sites were bought, where you worked with the city for 1.5 years, 2 years, and they may have been in construction for a couple of years.
Right.
So even if our economy turned tomorrow, those buildings are all going to be built out. We're always cognizant of what is happening in the market and being careful. Mm-hmm. But I think we are still in a very healthy market. Yeah,
it's interesting to me because I remember a few years ago there was a lot of information in the media. They were, the sort of usual scare tactics and negative news about, they're overbuilding, there's too many condos. And as a residential real estate agent, one of the things I'm seeing right now in the resale market is we're now going into bidding wars for resale condos because there aren't enough condos for people to buy. and the people who own them are staying in them, and therefore they're not putting them up for sale. So I think I have a little giggle when I think that, a few years ago, or even currently in the media, people are saying that we're overbuilding on condos. But on the other side, I'm now seeing, no, we're not, because they're actually